If you were on trial for creating an impact, would there be enough evidence to convict you? The reason that the organizations go from the $250,000 to be a $5 million charity is because they were proving their worth.
In this episode of Conversations Beyond the Brand, Tashana Thompson sits down with Jonathan Kilpatrick, co-founder of Grant Llama, a company helping nonprofits rethink funding with a more strategic and reliable approach to securing grants.
What are you actually seeing out in the nonprofit space from the perspective of like the traditional grant funding process and what's broken there?
Federal funding has been changed pretty substantially. There's kind of a group that was highly dependent upon federal funding. It's kind of put more demand on the private and corporate foundation. We call it the grant-iverse, right? So if you think of the grant-iverse, it's really made up of 5 things. So you've got what we see sometimes is they don't even realize there's a mental health component to what we're doing. But when the organization is going out and telling their story, a lot of times they're telling the part that might have been important to them or the way that they see the world. Take a step back and see the full picture. I'm not just helping the family. It helps the kids in schools have a stable home. It helps this. It helps all of the kind of tertiary stuff.
How do you partner with development directors so they don't see you as a replacement for their work? Welcome back to Conversations Beyond the Brand, the space where we sit down with heart-centered, mission-led leaders and pull back the curtain on the stories behind the brands. I'm your host, Tashana Thompson, a brand strategist and relationship marketer who has spent over 2 decades believing that your story is your strategy. This show is where I get to prove that, one conversation at a time. Before we get into today's conversation, if these episodes have been speaking to something that you are either building, leading, or wrestling with, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. It's the simplest way to make sure that stories like these keep reaching the people that need them. And it helps us continue bringing you leaders who are doing meaningful work. Today, I'm joined by Jonathan Kilpatrick, co-founder of Grant Llama, a company that is rethinking how nonprofits approach funding by creating something many organizations have needed for years, a more reliable and strategic way to secure grants. Jonathan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited for this conversation. Before we get into the awesome work that you're doing at Grant Llama, I want to start with you. Tell me about your career path and what led you to co-found this company.
Yeah, thanks for asking. We've had there's 3 partners, right? And so we've kind of had an interesting career path to get us here. All came from the tech space. I've been an entrepreneur a couple of different times, been on the sales side of the house, gone through some exits and all of that good stuff. The other 2 partners, same tech background and everything. We really just wanted to use the experience that we had in the tech space to kind of enable the not-for-profit space, because so much of what exists out there, it's a very underserved market in not-for-profits, and a lot of the time the people that had those kind of backgrounds would stay in that space for so long, just because of the financial side on the other end, where you get kind of addicted to it. But we got really excited just with everything that was happening in the AI world, with both AI and kind of traditional data science, careers deep into that, and wanted to say, hey, what can we do in this space that can actually do some good in the world? And we didn't land specifically in the grant world. We originally, we kicked around a bunch of different ideas. We've all been friends for 15 years or so, and really kicked around a bunch of different ideas of like, hey, what are some case studies? Let's go look at some of these opportunities that exist out there to take the knowledge that we have and see what makes sense. Well, we got really excited when we landed in the grant space. The kind of our first aha moment was that in our world for so long, it was, you get $1 of investment in, you get the $1 back, and then you get the profits that you kind of get to kind of sustain you. Well, in the not-for-profit space, it's the opposite. It's a furnace model.
Mhm.
You're basically taking the money that comes in the door and you're burning it. You're burning it for a good cause, but it's this whole process that has to replicate itself. And so that was a big interesting piece for us where once we saw that, we're like, man, this is we can help with that. There's some ways to help with that. So that was a long-winded question answer, but
No, it's a fantastic answer. It's a fantastic answer. So, do you remember like that one moment or conversation that kind of sparked this interest in going this way versus all the other, ways that you guys were researching and kind of kicking around?
yeah, I'm trying to think of like the exact moment. Well, I think one of the things that we were looking at was on the medical side of the house. So we thought like, you know, knowing what we know about the whole data space is you can kind of tell where the future's headed, where people are going to throw up paywalls so that you can't get the data without paying to get the data,
Right.
right? And so we went down that road a little bit on some medical billing, kind of just some medical stuff that we were kind of kicking around for a case study. And one of the guys was like, "Oh yeah, we go through this process of getting grants, and these grants supply this and this." And we all started thinking about it and did our research, and we realized, okay, all the data that's on the grant side, they can't throw up a payroll. That's IRS data. It has to be in there. Um, the charities actually want to help one another. Like it was. I guess I would say it's like when you're unwrapping a gift at Christmas, and it's like it just keeps getting better and better as you're going. The deeper that you go in, and then like the aha, like whoa moment was is once we started winning money for some of the charities, and you go to the galas, right, and you hear the real stories of the what it's enabling, and it's a very humbling experience, just to be we're just thrilled to be part of it with kind of enabling some of these not-for-profits to help them be able to get more money so they can do what they care most about.
Right. So you had lunch and talked about, your lengthy career in tech and mentioned how you and your partners being in that space. What was the moment where you said, okay, enough of this? I've made enough money for all the companies. I've made enough money for myself, perhaps even. And what sparked the conviction, I guess, that I want to do something different. I want to shift.
Yeah, I think it was I really think it was more just everybody seeing the good that we could do. And
Mhm.
I would love to tell you that we're just do-gooders, right? We're just people that want to do good for everybody. We're fouled humans just like everyone else. But
Years, we
you know,
all.
it was the cool part of it was is that it was really just doing the same thing that we were doing. If you do good at it and you're gonna you're gonna make enough, to be comfortable, right? You could be successful doing it. It just kind of checked all the boxes, where it wasn't just doing something for financial gain or, you know, pushing a little bit harder to hit a quarterly number so that you get something that you're not even going to remember in 6 months from now that you thought was important, but really it just I guess the stuff the work that the not-for-profits are doing, it matters, right? It really
Absolutely.
matters in people's lives. It actually matters in everybody's lives. There's just certain levels of recognition that people will either they'll learn that as time goes on that all of that's really important, and we're just happy to enable it.
So now that you're here and been doing this work for quite a bit, what are you actually seeing out in the nonprofit space from the perspective of like the traditional grant funding process and what's broken there?
Yeah, so the elephant in the room, right? The federal funding has been changed pretty substantially, right? So there's kind of a group that was highly dependent upon federal funding that's that has changed, right?
Mhm.
And it's kind of put more demand on the private and corporate foundation world. We call it the grant-iverse, right? So if you think of the grant-iverse, it's really made up of five things. So you've got the federal space, you've got the state and local space, you've got private foundations, corporate foundations, and then DAFs. They kind of make up that totality of where the money comes from. And a few of those buckets have kind of shifted in the future. And so we're seeing a lot of the traditional charities really looking to either get more money from their donor base, or how do we kind of do this at scale where we can go out now and find which private foundations and corporate foundations really care about what we care about, and matching all of that stuff up. I there's this little bit of a mantra too, that as the donors that had just given money, I wouldn't say blindly. I mean, I know some people would say they've given money blindly, they just keep giving no matter what happens, is where there's a real tie back now to quantifying impact and understanding exactly what that money that you've given to, how it helps with the cause that they're investing in. If you think of the money is investing, right? The foundations, the donors, everyone's investing into that charitable organization to help get an outcome. And so it's kind of making us think of more like a data person would, of what do we need to track? How do we need to tell the story so that they are fully understanding the impact of every dollar they give, and how, if it's something to, if it's feeding people, how many
Right.
people can I feed with this donation? And it starts to be personalized back to the either the donor or the foundations.
Absolutely. Because everyone wants to know at every level of giving that their dollars are making a difference. And I say that everything is about story, right? And what story are you able to tell with the brand? And in order to get funding, you have to be able to show that impact. Where is your data? How are you showing that you're feeding people, or clothing people, or whatever that it is that you're doing? What is the impact, and how well do you tell that story is directly correlated to the work that you're doing in terms of finding funding. When you think about, like, all the resources that exist out there for nonprofits and have for a while, why do you think grant funding has still been so unpredictable? Even before all the changes with federal funding, this was an issue in the markets, right? As
Mhm.
someone that's been working in grant and nonprofits for over 20 years, this has always been an issue. It's even more of an issue now, but why do you think that unpredictable nature has always existed with regard to funding?
Yeah, it's part of the human condition, right? When we communicate, we think I said this, and they think of it like this, and whether that's a foundation or a corporate sponsor, where
Right.
you can. Um, Part of what we wanted to do was to really be able to kind of get a funding profile on the foundations and on the corporate sponsors, where you can see over time where that needle is moved from the money flow perspective, right? Because what they would tell you on the foundation side is, well, we really haven't changed that much, right? We care about this, and this is kind of the trajectory that we've been on. Or it's back to the impact. It's quantifying what you're really wanting to get out of the money, right? So you'll see a whole group of funders that have gone towards, hey, we just do capital investments. Well, why do you do that? Because at least at the end of the day, I can prove that there's a building there, and then like, there's going to be a bus tomorrow. If somebody goes, where'd that $50,000 go? There's a bus right there. That's what I did. That building it came from the money. And I think the on the for the charities to really understand, what do the funders really want to get? What are they saying with their dollar votes? So it's not just the communication that happens with words, but it's actually the dollar votes that when you can see the money flow, you can really see, hey, here's what they're saying and here's what they're doing, and these two correlate in this kind of pattern, and it just becomes a logical conclusion of, who's going to support who.
Right. That's really good. I think about That's the missing link, and that I think a lot of nonprofits don't get, and you just mentioned it so perfectly. It's the human condition of, like, being so deeply rooted in the work and, head down, head in the sand, even at times, and not really looking up to say, "Okay, this is what's really happening. This is the impact," and telling the story.
Right.
The same is true for business, right? Sometimes we get so involved and engrossed in our organization that we don't hold our heads up long enough to tell people all the goodness that we're doing and the impact of our work, right?
Yeah, for a year, even on some of the technical IT projects, we would do time and motion studies. And the funny thing about going through the process of doing a time and motion study is people will tell you, "Hey, what do you do all day when you're doing this?" Well, this is what I do all day. And then you go back and look and you're like, "Okay, that's a part of what you do all day." Where we'll get in with different organizations, executive directors, head of development, and they know these stories inside and out. It's like, let me tell you about XYZ family. Let me tell you about, what these people, the amazing work that's happening here. And part of it is when you're supplying it, it is kind of that hand to mouth. It's reactive. Here, today I've got 10 things that have to be done. I can't get anything else done. And we even see situations. The reason I bring up the time and motion study stuff is what we see sometimes is they don't even realize, hey, there's a mental health component to what we're doing. There's a whole thing with elderly care that's part of this, and each one of those verticals, as we say, is a funding vertical. There's money that's trapped inside that vertical that says we will give to this, right? But when the organization is going out and telling their story, a lot of times they're telling the part that might have been important to them or the way that they see the world, but it's like take a step back and see the full picture. I'm not just helping the family, it helps the kids in schools have a stable home, it helps this, it helps all of the kind of tertiary stuff, because the foundations, a lot of them, and even if you look at the government side, why is the government giving the money in the first place? They're giving the money in the first place to affect change in some kind of way. It's an open acknowledgement that says it's not really great right now. We want to change something about this situation. It's not a fair world right now. We want to give this type of advantage or whatever it is.
Right.
And those things start to come through. Now, when the executive directors are telling the story, or even better yet, going back to their board and going, "Hey, can you help me get in front of so and so?" They don't know who that is or what story to tell. So I think there's a lot of kind of streamlining the story. And I think your business does a great job of that, of understanding this is your brand, this is what you do, this is how you need to tell that story. That it's kind of all of that stuff coming together that's really going to affect change.
I love that you said that. I have a few thoughts, so let me see if I could stick with one. My first thought is that, you're absolutely right. There are so many verticals that doing one piece of work in a nonprofit is having these other sub impacts, if you will, that we don't think about if we're in it and we're trying to accomplish thing A. We don't realize that as a product, that thing B, C, and D are being created, right? And I think what you're saying, what I hear you saying is that there is funding in sub impact B, some impact C, and perhaps sub impact D that may not be your original, target, but those are opportunities that many are missing.
That's right. And the world changes, right? The vernacular changes. Like we don't want to say certain words right now. Workforce enablement or whatever, or
Mm.
that there's certain things that'll be hotter at certain times where as a leader, you want to highlight your hot hand. You want to highlight the things. So if you're doing something with veterans right now, and it's there's 10 different, well, we mainly do housing, well, the housing's for veterans in a lot of these cases. That's the storyline, right? It's
Right.
understanding what is moving and then that money flow right now, whether it's a you know part of that grant-iverse, whether it's the specific information that the financial advisors want to hear about in the DAFs, and for the executive directors to understand that, hey, some of these financial advisors, they actually have discretion over what they present to their high net worth individuals that have DAF accounts. And that might be another way. So it's just looking at the total funding universe out there and how you might be able to get as much money as you can, because the part that's humbling is when we talk to these people that have devoted their entire lives to helping whatever group it is. It is like it's unbelievable, the work that they're doing and the way that they're doing and how they're doing it on a shoestring budget year after year after year. It's like it deserves better, and that's part of what we wanted to do, is just kind of I often tell the story about how when we got into the space, we originally saw it as like this massive dark warehouse where on one end you have the funders, right, the money, and on the other hand you have the cherries, right, the people that are looking for the money. And they're all kind of in that dark warehouse running around with little pen lights trying to bump into one another and go, hey, we care about food insecurity, hey, we care about mental health, we care about the arts. And they would eventually sometimes run into one another and think, oh, that's great, that's how it's done, it's all relationship. And it's like, okay, it is some being in sales my whole life and kind of having different businesses. Yeah, that's a piece of it. But what you want to do is you want to illuminate that whole warehouse. You got to be able to see who gives to what and who cares about what. And yes, the people that are telling you that their relationships and humans are not part of it, it's completely wrong. But you need the humans doing human stuff and the technology doing technology stuff to make this system be more efficient.
Absolutely. I was watching a video of yours earlier where you were talking about, like, okay, AI is great and we need the tech part. However, we need the humans running the technology and the AI in order to really make something impactful and create real change. And something else that you said about creating change, it made me think about other conversations we've had here on the podcast regarding this collective thought and how it takes all of us working together to really create a different world, to transform these organizations, to help empower people and to help, change people's lives. And I think that what part of what we've seen is that a lot of nonprofits just don't know what they don't know, right? And honestly, it seems like, many have been misinformed or underserved in some way when it comes to understanding how grant funding actually works for some of the smaller guys. And I would say even for some of the larger nonprofits that I work with, a lot of that money is coming from large corporations, the individual giving or some of these smaller foundation, you know, donations are missing in the ecosystem. What would you say to like this whole space of nonprofits not even being properly educated about how to think about funding?
Before we jump back in, have you ever felt like running your business means wearing so many hats? Like you're juggling everything at once? That's why we're proud to have Beyond Business Solutions as the sponsor of this episode. They help entrepreneurs like you stay organized, save time, and focus on what really matters, growing your business. If you're looking for your very own branding and marketing team that truly cares about helping you succeed, visit beyondsolutions.biz. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
Yeah, the how to think about it, I think is probably the question, right? And to me, it really gets down to what's fundable. There's certain thresholds that you have to kind of cross. A lot of times people are like, hey, we don't have a grant strategy, we're ready to do that. It's like, okay, well, help me understand why you're ready to do that. Oh, because we have a massive deficit. It's like, okay, because the funders are going to look at you and go, well, what the it's not a stable funding
Exactly.
kind of environment. So there's a lot of kind of like lead up that has to happen before you get to that. One of the big things that's happening in the space is kind of this move towards sustainability. So whether there's a component of revenue that you can create as a not for profit, and how that kind of flows through is, can we charge X number of dollars and to different people to have some kind of baseline of sustainability, that they're not ready for the to go after all these big funding. And you have to be realistic about, like, who's going to fund you, what they're going to fund, and how much they're going to fund. I think um uh, it just needs to make sense, right? I don't know any other way to say it. It just needs to kind of tick and tie. If you're a $250,000 a year charity that's growing and you want a $2 million, donation to do X, Y, and Z, that's going to be almost an impossible ask, right? Unless you have one person that has experienced, whatever it is that you're doing to a great degree, right? And so I think just understanding the space and kind of understanding who you should ask for the money and what's a reasonable ask is a big piece of that too.
What would be your advice on, I think about the nonprofits that I work with are typically in the, 5 million plus space,
Mhm.
but I do have a few that I have supported on a volunteer basis that are not there yet. What would you, if you had 3 things to give to those who are a half a million and below, where do they start in terms of thinking about that diversification? They have some money,
Right.
but
Right. I think a lot of it is just starting to really, we like to say things like, if you were on trial for creating an impact, would there be enough evidence to convict you? Right. And if
Mhm.
there's not, then you need to start collecting that data. So a lot of it comes down, the reason that the organizations go from the 250,000 to be a $5 million charity is because they were proving their worth the whole way along. They were really telling the story of what needs to happen. Um, I think a lot of it is kind of making your organization uh, one that is consistent for volunteers and for donors that are donating money on the personal side too, where the experiences they have when they come to your gala, when they come to your events, that they're organized and there's a structure there, and they don't feel like they're just being thrown out into the middle of it and, hey, good luck. um, I think just some of the structure, and then really just tracking the metrics that matter, and telling that story.
You know what I and the reason I'm staying here for a second because I can think of, a few nonprofits that I've had the pleasure of working with, either in a volunteer or other role over the years. And there are some that are at that, 250 or less and are making more impact on paper. Some that I've seen at the 5, 10, 20, like, and you really wonder as a consultant and as an advisor when I go in, I'm like, okay, I just saw people down the street have $20 million and you have $5 and you have all this, you're doing all the right things, you're sitting on your annual report, the data is there, the impact is there. What do you think people are leaving on the table at that? If that's the case. I hope y'all are watching.
Yeah, the it some of it too, right? I mean, let's just say it. Some of the ones that do well are because they have wealthy donors, right? And the donors they give money, and some of the people that have a massive impact don't have a lot of rich friends that can just stroke a
Mhm.
check to help, right? So it's, again, like life, not always fair. But I think there's the stuff that we can do. Just getting out there to some of the different events. I think there's development directors out there that can introduce them to some of those people, that to different higher net worth people that can make a big difference, and I think telling some of those through grants, you can win grants. We have several charities that were in the $200,000 range that won grants, right? And they're winning them pretty consistently. Um, it's
That's it.
It just depends. It really just depends. I mean, there's certain things that seem to be more fundable than others,
Yeah.
by based off of whatever the cause is and whatever's the hot thing at the time. Um, the concept too of campuses among like, hey, we're going to have a single campus where there's 10 or 15 different charities that can kind of take care of the full problem that we talked about.
Mhm.
Food insecurity is a piece of it. Food insecurity is causation of needing a better job situation, which is causation of, you just keep going down the list. It's like you got to wrap in that holistic kind of view of what's really going on, and what do the people that are using that you're providing your service at your charity, what other groups or other charity leaders could you kind of loop in to bunch together to see if you can tackle more of the totality of the problem than just the piece that you're doing right now.
I love that. And again, it comes back to the collective. And I'll have to introduce you to Sharif Rowe. She's out of Arizona and she was on the podcast. And you keep speaking about it naturally again and again. Like, how do we get these nonprofits together? How, the caudation piece. And Sharifa talks so much about that in her work. And again, it's the collective. How do we do these things together? One of the things that I want to talk about, like we talked about the nonprofits that are like, 250 or less and how to get themselves out there. There are a whole another set of nonprofits that are really in my stratosphere that are, at that $5 to $10 million mark. First question, how do you partner with development directors so they don't see you as a replacement for their work?
Yeah, great question. Listen, the people that are telling you that technology is going to completely replace people is crazy talk. It comes from not doing it. The the way that it really works, right, is that we are working directly with the development directors, and the reason for that is you've got everything I talked about in the grant-iverse, right? That is a transaction that can happen now through a application, right? Okay, so that's money for 2026. Let's talk about 2027. The LOI component, so the letters of introduction. So I've identified this group that has available grants that I can transact on right now to try to get money. There's this whole other group out there that they don't know me yet, right? But man, can I show you with the numbers that they care about what you care about? And we've got the list of people. So the actual development directors love us because it's here's your list of 20, right? That we think, here's all the evidence that says these people care about what you care about. They're funding your peers, they're funding, the exact same world in your backyard that
Mhm.
you do, but they don't have a grant to transact on right now. That is where the development directors go, hold my beer, right? And now I know that I need to go do that, and they just run out, they get it done, right? And so that's the part of the relationship that I was talking about. This is never going to replace the relationships, and the relationships in that dark warehouse when people would bump into each other and go, hey, we've got a great relationship. That is 1000% true, right? But what we want to do is we want to introduce you to strangers so that you then can go form more relationships. And that's really the secret sauce.
I love that. I love the way that you describe that. We live in a world, especially, it feels like now, of scarcity, and everyone wants to take their little ball and hold on to it so tight. And I could get a bigger ball if I come over and play with you, Jonathan, but I know this ball is mine.
Yeah.
And I think that, that's a very simple, strange analogy to kind of describe how I could imagine if you if you're not open-minded, how some development directors could, view some of the technology that you're providing. Like they could get a little scared.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The thing is though is that sustained funding is good for everybody.
absolutely.
It's good for everybody, and in finding out, it's good for the foundations too, because then they can say, hey, look, we tried this strategy with these 25 different organizations. We're trying to look at take one that like everybody knows, like, the Gates Foundation is there's known medical cures, right? We want to help do that throughout the world. Okay. So then you say that's my strategy. Now here's my execution plan that goes along with it.
Right.
And they've got a whole list of people that they're going to fund to try to execute on that strategy.
Right.
Well, in year 5 or 10, you go back and go, what's our scorecard? How are we doing? They may go, wait, we need to shift and do this, this, and this differently because we're not getting the outcome that we want, right? Because that is the way that when you talk, there is a very specific strategy around why people care about what they care about. Now you get the people, the foundations or that are just in a local community and they just want to give money to that local community, and that's all well and good too. Those the smaller foundations like that are probably just going to be connected through personal relationships, and that's great. But at scale, to really move the needle on something that matters in society, it's going to take kind of a concerted effort of everyone. Why is the government willing to give money through federal grants to something in the first place? It's acknowledgement that something's broken,
Absolutely.
right? They're not doing it because they're just nice people. They want to see change get affected. And so that's the other side of it, is sometimes we tell more of emotional stories, and
Mhm.
it's like it's there, and there's a time to tell an emotional story. There's also a time to tell a calculated, data-backed, evidence-based story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Walk us through what makes Grant Llama so different. And you've, alluded to it, but I want to be really clear about what makes Grant Llama so different from how nonprofits have traditionally approached this work.
Yeah, I don't I would say, specifically we just have a better tool set, right? To the ecosystem right now where I'll give you a real basic example that just logically kind of fits, right? If I know all the flow of money and I've mapped it back to see exactly who's funded whom and for what reason, and then I can see a real crystal clear picture of all the funding that's available right now, I can do a decent job of predicting like who's going to fund it, right? Netflix does it. They take all the past murder shows that my wife watches, and I come downstairs. Oh, were you watching another murder show, right? But so it takes all the past viewing history. It says, "Hey, look, there's another murder show on tomorrow. We should let her know about that one," and it pops up in the frequently ad one.
Mhm.
And guess what? She'll click on it and she'll watch it. Why? Because it scratched an itch that sometimes you don't even know you have, right?
Right.
It's the same thing with a lot of these foundations. Is it goes from what we hear a lot is people will say, oh, you got to have a relationship, and that is 100% true. You do
Right.
have a relationship, but you also have to get introduced to new relationships so that you can form relationships, and a lot of that is kind of just understanding that, what do I want? I want 27 to be easier than 26, and I want 28 to be easier than 27. And if that funding cycle starts to get more and more kind of definable or predictable, even, and we're not saying it's perfect, right? We're not the magic pill. There's no question. We're doing the work too, so it's not just like the SaaS platforms where you find stuff, and we do the finding, the matching, the writing, the managing. Once you do get, the unrestricted funds, that's easy, right? But once you get the restricted funds, you go, I don't know if I want any more of the restricted funds, you
Right.
because it's got a whole nother bag
Mm.
of tricks with it.
Right.
But yeah.
I really enjoy that. I know that you liken your organization to like an outsourced grant department. And I think that what's really amazing about what you do, most orgs, even at 10, 20 million in this market, have one development director.
Right. And they
And
get so overworked. I mean, they get so overworked, and it's like, I wouldn't say that we're necessarily an outsourced grant development department. I would say we are an insourced, we work for you,
I
right?
know.
And we're kind of working directly with either the existing grant team that's there, that says, hey, we're going to do this one, we're going to do this one, and we can just do it at a cost effective way because we're using technology to get us there quicker than what you would do if you didn't weren't able to do it, you know? And
Right.
that's like when I talked about the whole world before, we were making money for all these companies, basically cutting out steps and things, automating things, doing things with technology, where we said, hey, let's do this for some of these overworked people in the not-for-profit space, and do what actually matters for them, which is provide them funds to for their mission. It's all about going back to affect change in an organization. And how do you do that? They got to get money so that they can help the people that's in their cohort, right? And then it needs to be a system, so it's not just a one-time thing, where you create a muscle memory that
Right.
can then help sustain over time.
Yeah, I want people to get a real bigger picture of like how awesome this organization is and what you built is in the role that systems and data are like really playing in this model. How does that change what's possible? Like I know like one grant writer versus this, right? But I want people to hear like what changes for a nonprofit when they're able to work with you.
Yeah, I think of it as like there's really a couple of different levers that we pull. It's the time savings, and then it's doing the high value stuff. Th- Humans are doing the high value stuff, right? How much of your day, for instance, so I'll give you an easy example. I'm ready for driverless cars. Why? Because driving to me is not high value. I don't want to get in the car and have to focus on driving. I want to get in the car and end up where I want to be, right? And I want the car to do that stuff, right? I want it to do with the technology stuff, and people get excited talking to you about, oh, there's these different vision systems on the car, and this is how it works. It's like, okay, I'll just get in, and if it show up at my buddy's house, I'm perfectly content. You don't have to explain it to me anymore, because I want to spend time with him, and I want to be on my phone, playing my Angry Birds on the way there, so I don't have to like focus on the road. But I think that's it. It's time savings back to the organization. And then it's the consistency game. When you use systems and technology, it's not like me. It's not like me that on Friday at 3 o'clock is going, oh, I don't know if I want to be here anymore. I'm gonna go lay down, because that's human stuff. That's what humans
Right.
do. But when you get systems and processes in that whole, using AI, using models the way that you can, they don't get tired. They don't go on vacation. They're not moody. They don't quit. Think about all of the people that will come in and help you do something in the not-for-profit space for a little bit, and then they just quit, and it's like, oh, we got to start over. I've got to retell my entire story to this new grant writer about what's important to our mission, where we do what's called a trailblazer, where I like to say we expose our ignorance. We're literally cutting a new trail. We're gonna um, you know take your data, what we think we have in there, take your data, help write the first grant as much as we can, and present it to you. And you may go, that's terrible, right? Or change this, change that. It's normally about 85% right, and people are shocked that it's about 85% right. And what happens is when you make those changes, those iteration, it just creates the flywheel, where now, and we have humans too that are interacting with humans. So it's not like, hey, you get this technology piece. No, our humans talk to your humans, and then the technology talks to the technology to make it do other stuff.
I love it. You mentioned earlier the piece about sustainability and how there is no other way, really. We have to grow sustainably and not just think about the next cycle. How do leaders have to rethink their funding approach to shift to that? If they haven't already, like if they're under a rock.
Yeah, what I would say is that I'm learning from listening to all of them. They've been doing this a long time, and all of the executive directors, development directors, they're all trying everything under the sun,
Right.
right? To figure it out. Um, it's not an easy answer. It's like a sliding. It's a constant. It's not a static board. It's a very dynamic board of, now this is important and this is less important, and trying to keep, you know everyone happy. What I would say is there are some through lines though. And those through lines is if you can really quantify impact and you can really, for instance, they'll say, hey, this younger generation doesn't give money like the older generation does. There's gamifying things where it's not just, hey, I'm giving money to this exact thing. It's like, hey, you can literally log in and see the movement of what you gave and how it affected things. I give blood, right? I give blood. And one of the things, like, I can get on my app and it shows me your blood was just given to XYZ at this hospital in this location,
Mhm.
and whatever it is. And I would tell you, like, oh, I don't really care about that, but let me tell you, I'm on my app, I'm going, where'd my blood go? Like, it is part of it that kind of, that just interacting with the donors and the funders, whether it's commercial funds through foundations or government or just your own personal donors. I think there's just some exciting new ways that we can use technology to make them feel more connected. That's what's missing with everybody, is that connection feel. And how do I feel connected to my community? How do I feel connected to my school, or my organization, my charity, whatever it is? It's all the same.
I love that. And story builds connection, right? So telling those stories, I say that all the time. Story builds connection, and sharing that impact in the interactive piece that you just described. I haven't given blood in years, and now you make me want to go give blood again just so I can see where my blood goes.
Right.
So I think that those are pieces that, in the busyness of nonprofit work, it is tough work. It is grueling work. It is work where you literally, I tell my colleagues all the time, like, I'm holding this screaming baby. I'm trying to, this baby's screaming, this baby's bleeding. Literally, it feels like this in nonprofit work a lot of times. How do we create an environment where we can even slow down enough to not be so reactive and think through those sustainability plans? Because you're right, they have been thinking of it. But when a new screaming, bleeding something comes to, I won't call it a baby, call a baby somebody's name. When it comes to the forefront, they put it down, right? And we go back to knowing that ABC Corporation always gives us $1 million. So we're going to go back to them over and over and over again until one day ABC Corporation does not have that $1 million to give you. And where are you?
That's exactly right. And you can see when you use the kind of the data insight component, you can see exactly, you know, yeah, they fund these people, they fund for 5 years. So it's not if that money's going away, it's when. And so, as when we're the ones getting the money for 5 years, we go, oh, that really stinks. I don't like that. But when you're haven't been on the list and you go, hey, look, there's 15 funders here that are expiring at the end of this year that they've been funding for the last 5 years. We wouldn't normally write that grant. Let's write that grant. Let's do that one. And it's just a better mousetrap, I guess, of kind of
For
the
sure. For sure.
right.
Yeah, I think he's just getting, and this is a deeper conversation that maybe we should have some collective roundtable at some point and, bring some different players to the table. Um, but I think that nonprofits, especially in that sticky middle, that are still have small teams and are kind of getting smaller and smaller by the day as some federal funding kind of dries up, having the time to even say, "Oh, Jonathan, I want to have a conversation and utilize your service at the utmost and really get the most out of it." I want to acknowledge that that can sometimes be difficult for them.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think too, even finding like your way to recharge, whatever it is. I mean, I catch myself doing the same thing where sometimes you just get it's life, it can be overwhelming, right? And especially just the you know some of the way that the money has been pulled back from different things, it can be very frustrating and aggravating. And I think we all kind of have to go, all right, what do I need to do, whether it's me getting up in between calls and walking for 30 minutes, or you know call my mom, who she's always nice to me, I'll call her, right? Or whatever it is. I think it's a big it's a big part of it, is just kind of managing your own mental health too.
Oh, that's good. And that's a whole nother conversation for people that are working in nonprofits. That's such a thing.
Yeah.
It's such a thing. So, I'm a brand strategist and a relationship marketer. I have to talk in with relationships. How have relationships shaped your journey as a leader and now co-founder of this organization?
Um, I think it's been, relationships are kind of everything. The guys that I've known them for 15 years, that started this company with, and um it's been, it's just been a fun ride. I would say relationships and hang around with people that make you better, and
Yeah.
things happen, whether it's, I married up, right? Same thing, been married for 21 years, and you know it's a beautiful thing, how the relationship long-term stuff can kind of stick, and it makes you a better person over time. I think with especially in the not-for-profit space too, you know understanding how to manage the different relationships, whether it's the relationships you have with your board, with your donors, with, your volunteers. The, all of those are different relationships, right? Where you act in different manners, just like, I act different around my kids than I do when I'm around my buddies, which I wish was not true, but it's true, right? And the same thing is the case where I think being very thoughtful about those relationships, and knowing that, you know, trying to really understand the board and understand the volunteers and why are they really there, and even asking them some of those questions that may just feel a little awkward at times. Like, hey,
Right.
you guys have been coming here to this for 10 years, 5 years, 2 months, whatever. Why do you come? Oh, we come because of this. And they say things that surprise you, and then you think when you're telling other people, you start repeating some of that stuff, and they liked what you had to say too, and you realize, wait, they're all here just because this actually feels like a family to them,
Right.
or whatever it is, right? But yeah, the relationships, whether it's the people that have, you know all along the way in my personal life or my work life, lots and lots of people that have cared about me and been nice to me and put up with my idiosyncrasies for a long time that I appreciate.
Right. Same. I say that our lives and our businesses move at the speed of our relationships. Everything comes down to relationships. And I want to, you mentioned that you have three co-founders in your organization, and I know what it's like to have partners. Um, and that can be sometimes tricky. What have you learned about partnership that you wish more founders understood?
Um, yeah, we were really, really lucky because we were all friends first, and we weren't 25 either. I know you may see this and think, no, we're older and more mature. We're honest with one another, and I think there's this overlapping skill set where everyone kind of has a clear lane, but there's also skill sets where when it comes down to this one thing, I know that I'm going to listen to them, and there's a trust there.
Yeah.
I think the just and it's not perfect, but we're basically we're in a long-term relationship. I mean, we're almost married if you think of it that way. So how do you make that work? Well, you got to be honest. You got to be you say, what's working, what's not, and who's good at what, and making all of that stuff line up. And I feel really fortunate to have the two guys that we have.
That's awesome.
Very
That's
lucky.
awesome. Yeah, yeah. I had a business partner for 10 years. She's still one of my best friends. She's been on the podcast. We were having a think tank session this morning. So she's my sister, like a sister from another mister, right?
Yeah.
So I been friends for over 20 years. And even when the business relationship ended, our relationship hasn't. I think that that's so important to really take care of the relationships because things change,
Yeah.
but people are what matters. And you said something really profound about trust. And I believe in business and in our lives, trust is currency,
Yeah.
right? So, how do you intentionally build trust with the nonprofit leaders that you serve? Because this funding piece is like so personal to them.
Yeah. To me, right, it always starts with the actual the money side, right? And the contract side. I can say, "Oh, I trust them." You got to sign a 2-year, thing and it costs this and it's whatever. It's like, "Hey, w- we passed along the saving component so that everyone can experience it." And the long-term contract that doesn't exist. It's
Mhm.
basically we ask for 90 days and then you can be out at any point after that if you want to, where there's no it if somebody's not willing to do that, it tells me, well, why are they trying to lock me into this contract so that I'm stuck with them? Like
Right.
that fundamentally has to be there. And then I think it comes down to communication, where we go through a process, really, where we go from kind of the dating to the marriage, where the dating ends with a piece of paper that says, here's what you said you were going to do, here's what we said we're going to do, here's the number of things that we're going to do, and here's how we're going to check it throughout the process to make sure that after 2 weeks, here's what you should expect. And after the 3-month period, here's what you can expect, right? And so it's the same thing that the not-for-profits are doing with their donors. They're predicting and then proving an impact that they're making. And we're saying the same thing. If we tell you we're going to do this, we're going to write it on that piece of paper. And if I'm not willing to write on the piece of paper what I just said, you shouldn't be listening to me. And then once I wrote it on the piece of paper, here's what it actually means in the real world of, this is the output that you're going to get from it. And if you don't get it, then it's just transparency,
Yeah.
really. It's full transparency.
I love that. All right, Jonathan, where you go, I'm going to shift gears a little bit, if you'll allow it, and do this fun session that I like to
Oh,
call rapid fire, unfiltered and unplugged. So this is lightning fast, no overthinking, just name the first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
okay.
Ready?
Yes.
Morning person or night owl?
Oh, can I say neither? I'm moody.
Okay.
Is that well, I mean,
Booty stop.
I can be moody.
Okay. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
One word that describes your leadership style.
Energetic.
Best advice you've ever received.
Oh, there's so much. I don't know. Best advice I've ever received. That's hard to be a lightning round question.
Pass. We'll pass.
That's a deep one. I would probably
You know me.
say,
Go deep.
yeah.
You
no,
know.
I think the like there's a little poem from Rudyard Kipling that I love called "If." If you guys go read it, I think the best advice is in there. So,
Okay, that's good. That's good. One book that you would recommend to leaders.
hmm, to leaders, I think Good to Great. I'm showing that I'm old, but it's part of it. The old culture being the most important thing, whether it's a not for profit, whether it's an organization. Culture matters a lot.
Okay, two more questions. Biggest misconception about grant funding?
Only people that know me are going to give me money,
Very good. One thing you do to stay grounded?
right?
I love it. Jonathan, this has been such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for being with me. I appreciate everything that you shared, the structure, the strategy, all of it. For those who are listening and want to learn more about your work, where can they find you?
You can. It's just www.grantllama.com. We've got stuff on LinkedIn and all of that. If you pull up a meta ad and type in grant funding, you'll probably see it too.
Love it. And I will link all of Jonathan's information in the show notes so you can get in touch with him. If this conversation has resonated with you, please do me a favor and like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, stay rooted, stay connected, and stay in a relationship. Bye.